Thank you to these sponsors of the Before I Die New Mexico Virtual Festival in 2020. A Good Goodbye, Gail Rubin puts the fun in funeral planning. After, a new way to stay connected with your loved ones in the cemetery anytime and anywhere. Aquamationinfo.com, where you can learn about alkaline hydrolysis, an eco-friendly alternative to flame cremation. Compassion and Choices, offering care and choice at the end of life. Daniel's Family Funerals and Cremations and Gabaldon Mortuary in Albuquerque. Fairview Memorial Park and Vista Verde Memorial Park in Albuquerque and Rio Rancho. Avista Cremation and Burial in Santa Fe. DeVargas Funeral Home and Crematory in Espanola and in Taos. Estate Pros, which offers personal dispersal of possessions due to a move, illness, or death. French Funerals and Cremations and Sunset Memorial Park in Albuquerque. And Keeper, which helps you keep memories alive with online tributes to preserve, celebrate, and share life legacies.
Death is full of surprises, huh?
You have no idea.
It's Gail Rubin, the Doyenne of Death, welcoming you to this Before I Die New Mexico virtual festival session, Women Who Know What the Dead Want to Tell You. I got to tell you, this is my 4th year producing this festival. And last year, these ladies that we have with us today were on a panel in Santa Fe, and it was incredibly well attended and incredibly well received. Now, I got to tell you, of course, we're doing this online because of the coronavirus pandemic, and unfortunately, one of our panelists has gotten sick. She's being tested for coronavirus, but she's not going to know the results probably until Monday or Tuesday, unfortunately, but she's not feeling well, so she's not joining us. But that is Annie Mattingly, the author of the After Death Chronicles, where she talks about connecting with her daughter who died by suicide, and then expanding the conversation about talking to our loved ones who have died in many different ways. However, we do have with us Judy Fine, author of How to Communicate with the Dead and How Cultures Do It Around the World. Bethany Pye, who is a spiritual releasement specialist, and her company is Angels Helping Humans. We also have Andrea Campbell, a PhD psychotherapist in practice in Santa Fe. And Andrea will be our moderator for this panel, but I'll probably jump in every now and then.
So a friendly, warm hello to everyone. And we're ushering you into this fascinating and intriguing subject. It's timely for many reasons. One of them is COVID and the number of people who are leaving this planet, people who we care about and people we don't know. And also this time of year. I want to introduce Bethany Pye and Judy Fine. They're the experts, and they will talk about their experiences, and I'll briefly talk about mine. One of the things that Judy said is that this is a party. So Judy, take it away.
Well, party people, I'm taking it away. If you go to Mexico during the Day of the Dead is actually not one day, it's a whole cycle of events. But if you go to Mexico, you'd be stunned. The Day of the Dead is a party, it's a fiesta. Why? Because this is the time of year when life and death are closest to each other. They talk about the veil is so thin. So you go to the cemetery. And there's music, there's mariachi, there's dancing, there's party, and you give the dead her or his or their favorite drink and food, and you fiesta. Why? Because the dead come back. And one day the adults come back. And another day, it's the children who died who come back. And really, it's a cycle of inviting them back into the world we live in, and you celebrate with them. So the only culture that I have really experienced, I'm a travel journalist, and for 20 years, I've been going to other cultures around the world. Some you probably have never heard of the country, and experiencing how do they commune with the dead? Do they think there's life after death? And when I come back home, this is the only culture where it's taboo. You can't talk about it. So here we are saying it's a party. It's not a party to die, and it is not a party to lose somebody. But when you celebrate the lives of people who you knew and loved, or maybe you didn't even get along with, it's a party. It's a time to welcome in people who have passed through the veil. That's my answer.
Thank you, Judy. Bethany, would you like to add to that?
I'm so happy to be part of this party. I have been sending spirits to the light for probably close to 20 years and have sent thousands to the light. And for me, I don't notice when the veil is thinner because it's the same for me year round. People are making their transition, and some of them don't go to the light, and I get calls and requests to help. And I just want to add, we are taking a little bit of a lighthearted approach to this. We're celebrating the life continuing on. And just for anyone who's going through a grieving process, know that we empathize with you. And we have all experienced grief ourselves. It comes unexpectedly, even when you're expecting a loved one to pass. And it's a hard time. So hopefully what we have to share will put this in a little bit lighter vein for you. And we're going to focus on the hopeful side of it.
Thank you, Bethany. How about talking about what brought you into this in the first place? How your mind, your heart, your experience opened to talking to the dead and being a channel for it.
I was a senior in college, and talk about parties. I was party girl. I was at a very academic school, but I liked to party and have a good time. And I had no interest in religion, spirituality. It just never crossed my radar. And then my father died. He was 50 years old, never sick a day in his life, and he died horribly. And I was grief-stricken, partially because he was dead, and partially because the only parent I had left, I did not get along with. It was a very tumultuous relationship. So to get some kind of solace, I used to go to the cemetery, and I would just stand there at his graveside and just, I don't know, I was just so miserable. So one day I drive to the cemetery, park my car, I'm standing there in front of my father's tomb, and I hear a man speaking to me, and I was self-conscious, and I whipped around and there was nobody there. And it was my father's voice speaking with a diction that I would not use, using language in a way I would not use. And I really freaked out, and I called my elder sister and I said, Daddy just spoke to me. And she said, well, of course he did. You're open. And that was my initiatory experience. And now it's such a part of my life. It's like speaking about eating or speaking about talking to a friend on the phone. It's become so normal, but I had a very surprising, shocking initiation when I was 20 years old. And it's been with me ever since, not just with my father, but with people who have died.
I think I was born to do this. I was doing healing in the Philippines 20 years ago. And a woman sat in the chair, and without touching her, I was directing healing energy or light over her head. She lost consciousness, and her head started swiveling in a figure eight pattern like an exorcist movie. And because of my experience as a healer, Gail, I was not laughing at the time, let me tell you, but I stuck with it. And you have to avoid going into fear when you do healing or this kind of work. So I stayed in a love state, kept sending energy to her. She started to wake up and she said, "Are the demons gone?" And I said, "Do you have demons?" And she said, "For many years." And I knew I had to learn about this. I had to find a teacher to tell me about it. It was not part of my thinking or tradition. And I knew I had to learn to protect myself. And Andrea, you're wearing the color that I use for protection. So I think I was born to do it. And soon after, I did get trained. And when I communicate with those on the other side, it's with a purpose. And I initiate communication with them. So in that way, I do my work a little bit differently, but I was born to do it.
Yes, you were. Thank you, Bethany. Thank you both. So I'll share a little bit about myself. Having lost both parents by the time I was 12 years old, I was initiated into a group I never wanted to belong to. I'm in a book, it's called Motherless Daughters, and it's about growing up without your parents. I was very, very close to people who passed. And ever since childhood, I felt that I could traverse both sides. Even in my work with people who've lost their parents, I can traverse both sides, get a peek under the veil. Sometimes even someone who's passed will help me with someone I'm working with, as long as I have their permission. So when something precious is taken away, often we're given other gifts. And that was my experience. And that's how I got into all of this. So let's talk about what's special about this time of year. Ghosts, goblins, haunted houses, skeletons, Coco, the movies.
It's a magical time of year. The trees, the leaves are turning color. We're passing from summer to winter. It's a transitional time. And in so many different cultures, this is the time of year when it's most, when contact between the living and the dead is most likely to happen. And Bethany, like you, it happens for me all year long. And sometimes I'll be speaking to somebody and I'll say, somebody wants to tell you something. It just comes in. Once the door is open, it's open. And just seeing how normal it is around the world. And this seems to be the focus. The last day or two of October, what our Halloween is, the first day or two of November. But it's in very diverse cultures. So what is it about it? It's like the longest day of the year, the shortest day of the year. This is the most contactful time of year. And if you ever had an inkling that you would like to talk to somebody who has died, somebody you lost, and whether it's a good relationship or it was a bad relationship, troubled, you need answers, you want reassurance, you want to know the person is okay, this is a very good time to start, I think. So that's I think it's a magical time of year.
To me, it's an interesting time of year because I'm not so fascinated with death. have always believed in the continuation of life. So when I see how scared people make themselves and how huge the holidays are around Halloween and Day of the Dead and everything, I just find it very interesting. It really, to me, it's a spiritual time, and it's all year round.
Thank you. Yeah, I don't find this time of year any different than any other time of year, except that we're pulling in and winter is coming, and perhaps the change in the time and the light. And so fires and staying in might bring us closer to and reflection about people who have passed.
I was in Brazil, and it was on the 1st of November, and it's Dia aos Finados, the day equivalent of Day of the Dead in Brazil. And I was on top of a mountain with people from Nigeria, and it's an ancestral festival. And while we were waiting for it to start, my husband and I were the only non-initiates. It was explained to us that one day a year, the day we were there, there's a man who has a whip, and his job is to keep the living and the dead separate, because they're so likely to be commingling, and it's not good. You don't want the living and the dead to be exactly in the same place. And I looked at it as a folkloric thing. I mean, this is going to be funny. And then I was chased by a spirit of the dead on top of a mountain, and I really freaked out. And after about 3 or 4 minutes of my experience on top of a mountain, the man with the whip came, and he whipped away the living, and he whipped away the dead from the living, and boom, it vanished in front of me. So it is a powerful time. It's a very powerful time.
Since you brought that up, let's talk about why people are so afraid of death.
Why are people so
Go on.
afraid of somebody who's different from them? Why are people afraid of someone who has a different political opinion? Why are people afraid of other cultures? Why are people afraid of the dark? Because it's unfamiliar. And there are so many stories told about it that are so divorced from what the truth is. People are afraid of things that are not known to them, not like them. And I think it's part of that spectrum.
I wanted to actually add something here about why people are afraid of death. Yes, it is the great unknown, and we're generally afraid of things we don't understand. Yeah, there is no way of experiencing this with our ordinary five senses necessarily, although some of the communications we've talked about in this panel in the past have been hints like, butterflies or feathers or things that symbolize communications from our loved ones who have died. But also, we're afraid of death because we're afraid of not existing. The idea that when you're done with your body, you're done totally. And there are a number of people who hold that view, but we're here to share our experiences and discussions of that. Being dead physically doesn't mean you're dead spiritually, that there is an essence of energy, and it's right there in physics. You can't destroy or create new energy, it just changes shape. That's my 2 bits.
Thank you. Bethany?
I have to agree with Gail about people being afraid of not existing anymore. I just went through a whole month of being in the hospital, and because of my belief system, it was a comfort to me to know that my physical body is a vehicle. It isn't, in essence, who I truly am. And I honestly, the whole time I was in quarantine, didn't have visitors, and I did not feel lonely for that month. So I think it has to do with what we believe in my experience. But I find it comforting that as I grow older and my body does less and less of what I would like it to do, that I get a fresh start. I get to release this body in the end, and I will go on. And my belief is that when I'm released from my body, which is the point of death, that my spirit no longer feels pain. That if I had something like addiction or a disease or dementia, that I would no longer experience those because those are conditions of the body. So my knowledge, my experience from all the time I've ever lived goes on with me.
So I'd like to add something as well. I'd like to just say that Western materialism rejects what it cannot see. And we're frightened when we cannot see. Also, I think the ego is very attached to being alive and the life of the body. And you can feel it, touch it, see it. When we lose the body, when we give up the body, when the body is worn out by illness or whatever reason, the essence of us can continue. Mm-hmm. They also say that as long as there's love, we continue. So I find that when I lose somebody, they don't go away. My love goes with them. Wherever they are, I'm with them. And we continue together, although I just lost one of my best friends. And I will miss talking to her, but she's integrated and she's in me and she's a part of me. So that was one of my feelings about it.
You know, a lot of people, who have contacted me who want to communicate with the dead, and they say they're afraid. And I always ask them, what are you afraid of? And many of them say they're afraid if they communicate with the dead, it's going to cause up bad spirits, or something terrible is going to happen to them. It's going to call up evil spirits, and they're not going to be able to deal with it. And I've never had an experience like that, but I think we do many things with our minds. We've seen a lot of horror movies. But what does that mean, a bad spirit? If you communicate with the dead, which I hope you all the participants have a chance to do, you're in control of it. You want to stop it, you stop it. You want to try to call someone up, you initiate it. Sometimes the dead will initiate it. They'll make contact with you. You don't want it, you say, go away, come back another day, or don't go away, or I don't want to talk to you. So you're not in a powerless state. You have a lot of control over it. But the idea that, a bad genie is going to come out of the bottle, it's just nothing I've ever encountered. And it's the opposite. It's such a comfort. It's so intriguing. It's so interesting to go into a realm you haven't gone into before. But people are allowed to be afraid. They're entitled. And you can address it by saying, honestly, I never had an experience like that. And you're in control.
So you're talking about several things. And one of the things you're talking about is there a benefit from it? And can the dead hurt us? So let's leave that open also for the rest of the panel too.
People call me when they get what I call an attachment. They call a possession. It could be also an attachment to a property. But basically, spirits on the other side are us without a body. And the only ones that I experience that really cause any problems are the ones who didn't go to the light. They didn't go home. They have their reasons for not wanting to go, and they have choice. But just like people who are embodied, there are mischievous people, or even people who enjoy causing distress or problems with other people. And so that's when I get called, is to deal with them and to help convince them that it's in their best interest to go home. And they can exist without a body and travel and jump from person to person or property to property for a long time, sometimes thousands of years. So I probably get more of the exception than what you're talking about. And I totally accept what you're saying as true. And I see the other side of it. And for that reason, I've done a lot of work about being in a love space and not giving into fear when I do my work.
So what you're saying is important, Bethany. It's that being in a love space helps protect you in your work.
It does, but that's where the power is. That's where all the juice is, where the energy is. When we give into fear, we're giving away our power. We aren't able to do energy healing, which is, the divine healing coming through, and we're a conduit. And what I do is a form of healing. So love is where it's at. And like you were saying, Andrea, the connection we have when it's a love connection is the one that goes on. My belief is love is the ultimate energy, and that is the one that carries on throughout eternity.
I think that the way you are, I love this because we have different experiences, different points of view. It's terrific. I think that the way you are when it comes to being receptive to or initiating communicate with the dead is very much related to how you are in life. Mm. So what do you do in life if you think that somebody's toxic and not good for you? Do you smile and grin and go ahead and engage? Do you disengage? Do you disengage violently? Do you just walk away and say, I'm busy right now, can't talk right now? Life and death are not two completely separate realms when it comes to that. So I think the answer is very linked to how you deal with the same thing in life. Do you have any kind of feeling of spirit possession in life? Do you feel that there's a demonic energy in your life? Where are you at with that among the living? And I think there's going to be continuity with the way you are among the dead. But I think people are powerful. They can say yes, they can say no. You just have an unlimited range of ways that you can experience life and death.
We have a question from the audience. Lori is asking Bethany, when you say home, what does that mean? Where is home?
What I have learned from archangels and my work is that when we leave our bodies, we can stay around for a while. People tend to want to see their funerals. They want to see who shows up. And then, it's time to go. And where we go is basically to the light. And everybody who passes is eligible to go to the light. And we go to whatever level that we're comfortable with, whatever level of love we can hold. Some people go to a little higher place that's closer to what you would call God. Some people have a lot to learn when they pass over, and they're lovingly accepted into schools of a sort. But what I would call light is the same thing as going home. And it's different from what religion teaches about heaven and hell. What the archangels tell me is there is no literal heaven or hell. So we all go back to our natural state of being. And it sounds the opposite of what we think of with Western materialism, but we are energy. So we go back to a non-physical state. And it's natural for us to be there. We can spend a lot of time there if we want. We can come back and materialize into another body, have another lifetime here. Because we learn a lot when we come into material existence. So for me, I just call it going to the light. When I, facilitate people going, I facilitate them to the light. And there are guides and angels of the light who help them get there. I have whole teams of non-physical beings who do the work on the other side, and I'm the orchestra conductor on this side, saying, here's one that wants to go, who's ready, come and get him. And it's a joyous thing. There really is a welcoming committee of our loved ones. And we recognize them when we cross over, whether we have a physical body or not.
We've been watching we have a different collection of film clips, which include clips from Defending Your Life.
I love that.
I love that film. And there's this great scene where I'm blanking on the actor's name.
Albert Brooks.
Albert Brooks, yes, is sitting there talking with his attorney, Rip Torn. And he's like, is this heaven? Is this hell? He's like, no. Although I hear Los Angeles is getting pretty close to hell. But just the whole idea of defending your life, and are you afraid in this lifetime? And then people who overcome fear get to move on to other planets, not just Earth. And Albert Brooks' character is rather fear-filled, but he does overcome it with the love of Meryl Streep by the end there. I don't know, what do you think about that film, Bethany? I mean, I love it. The idea. You're not being judged. You're just looking at what you've done in your life and what you've learned.
I love that film, and I've seen it a couple of times. What I've been told happens in reality is the life review is real, but how it happens is that we experience the pain we have caused others from their point of view. And then we're given the opportunity to ask ourselves, could I have done that better? It's done in a very, very loving way so that we can learn. And every time we come and inhabit a body, we come into this third dimensional denseness. It's so that we can learn. And the time and space is different from the non-physical. Everything is different here. It's like when you learn the hard way, you really learn it. So I do love that film, though.
People that I hear from seem to be of several minds. One, especially people who have told me it comes from their Buddhist practice, is that when you die, you do not keep any of your personality that you notice, recognize here in life, but you become part of that energy. You become part of eternity. You become part of the foreverness of pure energy. And then, of course, there's reincarnation. The other side, the other possibility is that, yes, the dead are there. They're not physically there, but the dead are there, and they want to communicate with you as much as you may want to communicate with them, because the instincts are still there, the desire to help, the desire to support, the desire to find out, the desire to impart, to say that I'm okay. And so how do those two things fit together? So I've come to believe that they can both fit together. That when you die, yes, you become a chicken leg in the eternal soup. Yes, you become a matzo ball in the chicken soup of eternity or something like that. But you also have a lingering connection to the living. I don't think they're mutually exclusive, but especially for participants, you may want to think about, what is your belief about this? What do you think? Because that will determine a lot about what's going to happen to you in terms of this party.
I'd like to add something to that. It's been my experience that when people die, they become huge. The energy is so big, a building can't encompass it. And that they can, for me, perhaps, keep that personality, that identity, so that I can be comforted and see them, hear them, feel them. But that they also have many other facets to that huge self. The facets that are one with the light and the ocean and all being and other planets and God knows what, I don't. But that's been my experience.
How did the
And
rest of you feel? Oh, go ahead.
And I think that's going to be me, because that's what I believe.
You're big in life. You've got a head start. How did the rest of you feel that people can benefit from having communication with the dead?
I'd like to say that they can complete business, that many people lose someone and they haven't felt complete with that person. And I see that in my practice as a therapist. So communicating with that person is really important for healing, for having closure, particularly with suicides and sudden deaths.
I tend to agree with what my colleagues say. And so I'm looking for maybe a different point of view. But for me, when I do my work, sometimes whole groups come and they want to go to the light. And that's why I say I've sent thousands to the light, and I don't know specifically a number, because sometimes it's groups and they find me. However they do that, they figure out I can help them. And so I don't know how to explain. It's a strange life, but I'm happy to be of help. Sometimes I'm not trying to communicate with the dead, but they let me know that they're in my living room or something like that.
Dreams are one way that the dead do communicate with us. I've been here in New Mexico for 30 years now. It's hard to believe. But when I was first coming out to New Mexico, I had a dream that I was standing in the family room at my parents' house back in Maryland, and I was standing on the west side of the room, and my grandmother and my great aunts, her sisters, were all standing on the east side of the room, and they were smiling at me. And it was it still sticks with me as such a vivid and comforting dream that my ancestors were saying, yes, go west, young woman. You're doing the right thing. And I have had, just a couple of dreams that are powerful like that. And I think that is definitely the dead communicating with me.
I also have come to believe that, of course, everybody could communicate with the dead if the dead are in agreement and they want to communicate with you. But I think that people who have more of a facility for this kind of through the veil communication may be people who've had traumatic childhoods. Because when you have a traumatic childhood, one of the things your soul wants to do is just separate from the pain, just go away. Well, where do you go? You go to other realms. And I think that may be one of the few advantages of having had a very difficult early life beginning, and it can happen late in life also, that your soul is screaming to escape, to get away from the pain. And bingo, doors open and you're able to access other realms. Death, of course, being a biggie.
So speaking of that, what have you learned? What have they taught you? And Gail, did you want to say something?
I was going to say there's a question in the chat, but we can
Go
come
ahead.
back to. Oh, okay. So this is from Patricia. When you refer to veil, what are you referring to? Is the light like a tunnel? Is there another side of the light?
I don't usually use the word veil because it seems like it's always close to me, but that's the word people use when they talk about the separation between the living and the dead. The veil is thinner, so the connection is closer, for instance. What was the other part to that, Gail?
Is the
the
light
tunnel.
like a tunnel?
People describe that when they have a near-death experience,
Mhm.
but it's not necessarily the same for everyone in every situation. When I talk about the light, it's more of a generalized description of the other side, where we go to live where it's normal when we don't have a physical body. Or also sometimes I'll use the word light to describe God, and God is made of love and light. So love, includes compassion and empathy and all the different things that love is. And light is enlightenment. It's knowledge with wisdom. It's when we have experiences of getting tremendous knowledge and we can't quite figure out where it came from. It's kind of beyond us. That's when it's close to God, love and light.
So I used the word veil. I was the one. And I like to think of it as a kind of a gossamer curtain, something that you can see through, but you don't get the full picture. And that's just my fantasy, maybe from my childhood or whatever you want to call it. And those are words. And we're trying to use words to describe something that is way beyond the human psyche. That's one of the things that makes us so afraid, because it's beyond our understanding, just as we can't see atoms vibrating. It's beyond us, but we have a sense of it. We have a knowing of it. In some part of ourselves that's much greater than the little everyday chicken soup self.
About the veil, is it okay to go back to the question Patricia, I think Patricia had about the veil? When you think of a veil, I know in the Old Testament, in the Hebrew Bible, there's a description, women have veils. When you go to a wedding, much less now, but there used to be a veil. And there's an aspect of something hidden. And death, something porous, something thin, something beautiful is hidden behind it. It's a bride. It's a woman with certain modesty. But there's also, it's not complete. There's a hidden aspect. And I think that while we are in bodies, while we're incarnate, we're not supposed to know everything about death. There's a hidden part of it. And I like that. When you die, then you're going to know. And until you die, there's a lot of guessing. There's a lot of feelings you've had or intuition or experiences you've had. But the idea of the veil is that you're very close to the beauty. You're very close to it, but there's still a hidden aspect to it. So it's a dance with mystery. And if you think about a curtain, like a theater curtain, when the curtain closes, that's the end of the play. This is not. This is I like your word gossamer, Andrea, a gossamer veil. But just remember that there's a mystery. There's something hidden from you, because that's what you get when you're on the other side of the veil. What I have learned from all the cultures and from my many personal experiences is kind of what I was alluding to, that you have a certain number of years here in your body. Hopefully you're going to have many other experiences, or hopefully not if you don't want them. But in your body, you have a certain amount of time. And especially now, people are in isolation. You're not using time the way you used to use it. You're not going to movies. You're probably not going to restaurants. You're not congregating with people. So this is a time when you might be able to tiptoe into areas you were afraid of before, that you said no to before. You have a certain number of years left. Maybe, hopefully there are a lot of them if you want there to be a lot of them. What are you going to do? Are you going to keep living in the same track that you've been in? Or are you going to look to the left and look to the right and say, whoa, there's a lot out there, and open up to these experiences while you have this time when there's much less distraction? How many movies can you watch on Netflix or Amazon Prime? Some point your eyes start to hurt. So what are you doing with your time? And are you willing to start experiencing other things? And I think that's what I learned. It is normal. It is normal to expand beyond this narrow tunnel. Someone asked about a tunnel. The tunnel that we're living in. It is perfectly normal to expand our universe, have other experiences, allow ourselves not to say, nah, that's not true. Nah, that's not impossible. What if you're sitting there, you're in isolation, you're not having a lot of fun maybe. What if you stopped saying no to things and you said, well, why not? What if you just changed no for why not? That's what I have learned, that there is very little to gain by living in a narrow straight your whole life. That's what I've learned. And once you start opening, contact with the dead and many other things become normal, acceptable, exciting. That's what I've learned from the dead, Andrea.
So what you've learned is about mystery and about opening and
Yes.
and more of life, taking in more of life and being out of the narrow and coming into the expansive. And I think we all agree that we want to have meaning in our lives, and that talking to those who've passed on gives even greater scope and meaning to this life that we're living in this body now. So I'm wondering what Bethany and Gail have to say about that.
I do agree that my perception has been expanded since I've been working with folks on the other side and with angelic beings as well. I've learned to let go of a lot of fear and to go deeper into love, universal and one-to-one, and love for animals and for life of all kinds. But what I'm also experiencing is the non-physical dimension is so strange. It is so different from our three-dimensional reality and the limitations we have. When you take away the limitations, it's just never-ending interest and trying to understand. And I've been told so many times, your human mind cannot understand some of these concepts because I keep asking questions. It's so big. And so what you were saying earlier, Andrea, is we are so big that it's hard for us to understand. We're so expansive, and we're kind of holding ourselves in to our three-dimensional boundary. So I'm experiencing both worlds, and it's very interesting.
Thank you.
I think I'll go back to defending your life to reflect on, we use 3% of our brains, maybe 5% at the most. And our more evolved folks, use 47% of their brains. So yes, it's hard for us to understand just how big the universe and life is. And I think one of the lessons that I take from all of these conversations and stories that I hear is that we need to think bigger um, and trust in love. And like you say, Bethany, work out of
Mhm.
love, now not out of fear, because fear is what keeps us getting reincarnated back here on Earth. and and we can evolve and grow with love.
All people who act in a loving way.
And love starts with the self in your own heart. So that's where we begin, right here on this planet, in this earth body. That's the work. Then we can expand and hopefully forgive.
So thank you, Judy and Andrea and Bethany. And a shout out to Andy West, our tech person who's behind the scenes.
Thank you.